allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, never my preference to call special meetings, but because of the time frame and the issue at hand, I will let our attorney speak to the escrow agreement in front of us. First, as a roll call, we have Councilwoman Cindy Boss present, Deputy Supervisor Ron Feller, our Deputy Clerk Karen Miller, Councilwoman Kristen Brown, and Councilwoman Sherry Millick was out of the area and could not accommodate to attend today, so she is absent. And we have Will Frank, our attorney, and Highway Superintendent Sean Mears, and we are live streaming. Will, please speak to us a little bit about our one item today, the Stormwater Site Improvement Inspection Escrow Agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. We have a proposed agreement here from the Sailfish Amazon developers. It's in the name of Blue Water Industrial Partners, LLC. The agreement is made keeping in mind local law number 1 of 2020 that was passed recently with regard to inspection fees, and a percentage of the inspection fees, a percentage of the cost of the improvements would ordinarily be charged to an applicant prior to work beginning. Now, in this case, there was a request from the developer because the percentage of 6% would put those costs that they'd have to deposit with the town in the millions of dollars for inspection by the town professionals, and quite frankly, in consultation with the town's engineers and other professionals, including the building department, it's not going to rise to that level of money to inspect the stormwater improvements as the project is going along. The building inspection, the inspection fees for the building itself and that construction is covered by the building department fees. What we're talking about here is the stormwater improvements and the SWIP, and the stormwater improvements to the project. So at the suggestion of our engineer, one of our engineers, Jim Farr, who puts the estimated costs at approximately $400,000 to $500,000 start to finish on the stormwater improvements, there was a request made for an escrow agreement to start the project off with, which would be replenished when it got to a certain threshold. What the town has requested and what the developer has agreed to is the deposit of $250,000, $45,000 of which is already in the possession of the town, an additional $205,000 to be deposited within 10 days of the date this agreement is signed. And at any time, and this is to cover inspection fees for the stormwater improvements and the drainage improvements and all of that during the course of the construction. If at any time the balance in the escrow account for the inspection fees drops to $100,000 or less, the town has the right to request the developer replenish that account, and if they fail to replenish that account, then building permits and inspections the building permits would be suspended and inspections would stop until the money was put in. That additional money would be an estimate made by the town at the town's sole discretion. The other thing to add right now is that if that $205,000 is not deposited within 10 days, any building permits that are issued would be suspended until that deposit is made. Essentially, this protects the town to make sure we have money on hand to pay the engineers and everyone else necessary to do those inspections. As I said, the inspections of the building, and they're not ready to start doing the building, those are funded through the building permit fees that are being collected for the project, which
$490,000?
$490, somewhere in the $500,000 range, and that will cover those fees. And if there comes a time when there's a deficiency for those inspections, which is doubtful, they'll be required to replenish as well. So that's the nuts and bolts of this.
And again, sorry about the late notice, but the closing of this is gonna take place next week, and in order to get things moving and protect the town, we wanted to make sure that everybody was accommodated. So does anybody have any questions for Will? Chris, anything?
Yep, I didn't know if they wanted, no, nothing, okay. First question is, I have two versions. I have one that's in blue markup and one that's in red markup. I didn't see any differences between the two, but.
The last email that I sent earlier this morning.
Okay.
Yeah, there's two, so there was two attachments, and one was in blue, one was in red, but I believe they were identical.
They're the same, one was a
Yeah.
PDF and one was in Word, one was in PDF, I think that's one.
When I reviewed them very quickly, I didn't see any differences except for the.
Yeah, there
They
were two different
versus the
formats.
bottom. Okay. The first question was, I sent you an email yesterday, Will, and I did copy the board with 4 letters that were provided to the town planning board. They were letters from the Village of Walden, Tom Montgomery CAC, Wallkill River Watershed Alliance, and John Brown regarding the water quality monitoring in the Tinbrook. And I asked if we would be able to use the escrow account to do that water quality monitoring. Well, do we have any
That
discussion
doesn't cover, this agreement does not cover the Tinbrook.
on that? Okay. That was actually provided to the planning board prior to discuss it, and they did not, so I was hoping that we could use the escrow account to, do the water quality monitoring, get it paid for through that.
Well, let's keep it on our radar. We wanna make sure that's done, and we wanna make sure we do everything we can to monitor before and after. And I think that's your point, right? You wanted to have some sort of threshold prior to the work.
Yes.
As well as after. And I know that there are studies being done. I know that the original conference call that we had, that there were existing studies that were done. I know there were certain portions of the Tinbrook. I'm not quite sure if they would be accurate, depending on the dates they started them.
Yeah, my hope was that it could start right downstream of where the project is gonna go.
Okay.
Especially with all, I mean, we can look at other municipalities in the county, but especially with what's going on in Goshen and the impact of that large-scale development to the Otterkill, is my concern of what would happen to the Tinbrook with regards to the Village of Walden wells downstream in the Sand Aquifer right adjacent to the Tinbrook and protecting our village residents there.
Okay.
My sense on that, knowing how the DEC operates, if there are any issues of any runoff coming from this project that's going to affect the Tinbrook, the DEC is gonna step in and deal with that and put everybody on notice immediately.
I understand.
We had that situation, not to get off track, but I've been involved the last few days in the New Paltz situation where the water had to be turned off, and in a situation like that, there was pretty quick mobilization, so I will put that out there.
On top of that, I'm willing to reach out to the developer and talk about some of these desires, because I share your, appreciation for trying to find out before and after if there's any issues. So we'll enter into some discussions and see what we can do, but that would be separate from this escrow agreement.
Okay.
Yeah.
My other interesting thing is I was speaking with a construction director, New York State Thruway, New York Division construction engineer. Regardless, the state entity actually handles millions and millions of dollars of projects, and they ask 10% in escrow. We're asking 6%. If they don't use the 6%, we return the money to them, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so why are we asking 6% when it's the entity that handles more construction projects than we do asking 10%?
Well, it's the law we passed, right? So we can't really change it now. We could choose to edit the law later, but that was probably for a discussion when we adopted the law. And I know the law was passed, the public hearing on the law took place, last October or earlier in 2019?
Yeah, keep in mind that this agreement deviates from the 6%. So the key thing we have here is the replenishment. If it gets down to 100,000, the time it would take to do you know, the first 150,000 of inspections from our professionals, we're gonna know how quickly the funds are being depleted, and then we're gonna be in a position to say, okay, it's time to replenish this, and it needs to be replenished by a certain date, or everything is gonna come grinding to a halt, including the permits.
So two things. We've protected the town in this agreement, but to Councilwoman Brown's point,
Mhm.
there are a few things that I even saw in the law that we passed after the fact that, and especially the fact that we're having this special meeting to create an ESCO agreement where we probably should take a look at the law. So as we take a look at the law, we can take a look at what percentages make sense as well, compare them to other communities that have similar laws that are passed. I think we already did that, they were
And-
close to 4 to 6%, but.
And whether the law, and this is something that was talked about, and I don't wanna get into a referendum
no.
on the law right now,
Sure.
but one of the things that was talked about in the law is affording the town board some discretion.
Sure.
When in a situation like this, quite frankly, it's never gonna rise to the level of a few $1 million in inspection fees. It's just, I don't believe that's gonna happen. So we may wanna look at that somewhere down the line, but that's not why we're here today.
Thank you.
Correct.
I only have two other comments. Number 6, page 2. My concern is that this appears to be a direct conflict with local law number 1 in 2020. Thank you, Supervisor, as you stated that. Just to point out there, this to me sets a bad precedence because it's wavering from our law for one individual large-scale project with other projects that are coming down the pike. That to me, it was just passed last month,
Yeah.
isn't it? So, that being said, I will be abstaining from this vote, specifically because the original email on this, I do thank you for your diligence work, and Brian, on this. I understand it was a time-sensitive issue. But to me, the original email was sent yesterday at 5:30 p.m. that I got from you. There was a new email sent at 10:44 this morning. For me to do my due diligence as a council person and to bring this here and vote on it now, it's just not enough time. We had an IDA meeting at 11:30. So I will be abstaining just because I felt like there was not enough time to prepare for this.
Understood, thank you. Any other discussion from the board? All right, would anyone like to make a motion, correct me if I'm wrong, Will, to authorize the supervisor to sign said stormwater and Town of Montgomery stormwater and site improvement inspection professional fee escrow agreement?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, we'll do a roll call vote, all in favor, Cindy?
Aye.
Ron?
Aye.
I'm an aye. Sherry is absent, and Councilman Brown?
Abstain.
Abstention. All right. This is carried. Without any other further business, would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Oh, sorry, hold on. What
I
you
have
got,
one
Karen?
thing that somebody gave Tara, long ago bad, in town, it was bad.
That's his request.
Mhm.
I'll take care of this on 20th. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, motion adjourned? Did anybody second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Motion carried. Thank you. 43, I was wrong.